She's 23 years old. Okie doke. Continue. Got it.
Okay.
Okay. So Violet is 23 years old. She's just gotten out of prison for vehicular manslaughter. She served 22 months of a 28-month sentence. And she's just coming out, and she's in Portland in an apartment, scared to death. And on the outside, she runs into Harriet, who is a retired English teacher who did a book group inside the prison and knew Violet from there. And they run
Like
into
someone
each
I
other
know.
in the local bookstore. And somebody else who works in that bookstore is Frank, who is a retired machinist. And unbeknownst to anybody, he is the widower of the person Violet killed in the accident.
Oh,
So it's
This,
three
this
people
is
kind
great.
of lives colliding on the outside. And that's what it's, and
That sounds amazing.
things
And Monica,
ensue.
you're using uh,
Oh,
your skill set, which is how you and I met originally long
yes,
ago. But
right.
that I think many people do know, but that you've taught in prisons, and you taught at the main correctional facility. Is that
Yeah.
the name of it, I believe?
Yeah, the correctional
For
center.
a number of years.
Yes, for about
That's
3
exciting.
years. Yeah, it's funny. The women and there's a lot of scenes inside, flashback scenes in the book club. And well, they're not even flashback. Violet's not there anymore, but the other women are there. And Harriet goes every Friday for 2 hours and they discuss books. It's not exactly like what I did. It's more of a reading group. So they're doing different novels. And in some ways, the book is about how to read a book. There's a lot of stuff in it about how books are structured and how I think readers will be interested in that. What Harriet has to say about reading and what the women teach her about reading. And it was really, it's the fastest novel I've ever written. I wrote it in a little over a year and a half, which is turbo speed for me.
wow.
Like half of what it usually takes. And I like the characters so much. It was really, I didn't go through the normal existential angst in this book that I have in almost everything else I've done. I felt like the whole time I was doing, there were times when I thought, oh my gosh, but most of the time I thought, I think this is working. I think this is going to be a book.
Yeah,
So
it sounds like you have it sounds like magic in a way to be at that moment when you feel like you're writing something that is coming together and
yeah.
holding up. Did you do any major revision as you went, or did you
No, this
kind of
is
stick
so
with
interesting, Christina. The whole process I used on this book is different from anything I've ever done. First of all, it came to me like nothing has ever come to me. It came to me in the night as monologues that I couldn't get out of my head. And it was 2 summers ago. And I was going through a different kind of, I was really depressed that summer. And I couldn't sleep. It was really hard to sleep. My head, just it wouldn't turn off. And so I remember listening to these characters and saying, I'm a playwright now. Go find somebody else. I am not going to do this. I just didn't want to. The commitment is so huge, and I just didn't want to do it.
I remember you saying at one point that you might never write another novel.
Yeah,
That wasn't
really
that long
that was
ago.
true. But I didn't. I went downstairs and I wrote. There was a street light right in front of my house, and I sat on the bottom steps and just wrote these monologues longhand, which I also never do. I have this notebook. It's right here. They're in here. I don't know if you can see it. Notes for novels. One of those hardcover. You could kill somebody with one of these. And I just wrote all that stuff down, and then I just put it aside for a little while, just to kind of get it out of my head and onto a page. And then about a month later, I was feeling better for one thing, and I said, let me just see. And I decided to write it the way some people do, is just like from beginning to end, even though it's not gonna. But I did it that way, just following whatever happened next. I didn't go back because I usually revise as I'm going, and it takes so long. And I thought, I just wonder what it would feel like to do it the way other people do it. And I did, and I had a whole draft in a year. And then I spent 6 months with the heavy revisions of that draft. So the whole thing is so different that I don't even know plus my publisher was just sold to another publisher. So I have no idea. And I think what people don't understand is that even writers like us, there's no guarantee that our next book will be published. I mean, there isn't.
So
It's a
Monica,
really
where are you right now?
business.
You're not under contract.
No.
Right now. Your publisher's been sold to another. So
Correct.
which place were you,
I was at Houghton
which place
Mifflin
were
for the
you?
last, yeah, Houghton
Houghton
Mifflin
Mifflin.
Harcourt for the last 2 books, and they just sold to HarperCollins.
Wow. Oh
I
my
know.
gosh. So you're sort of in, well, you have a very seasoned agent who will see this through. And we're going to come back to some agent questions in 1 second. But someone's asking, how were you able to differentiate between whether your characters were from a play or a book?
Oh gosh, you just know. I just knew. I mean,
But you were saying at first you heard them as monologues, right?
I did, but I knew they weren't monologue. They weren't play monologues. They were people talking in a book. I just knew it. It's not any, I just,
right.
Characters come the way they come, and where they want to be. And these people did not want to be in a play. Yeah.
So let's go back for a second to the agent question. Someone asks, were you always with the same agent? How did you find your agent originally? What is that relationship like?
Yeah, well, I've had Gail since we were both 36 years old. I mean, we were both 36 years old, and I met her in New York, and she had been recommended to me by another writer. And I didn't have a novel then. I just had stories, and she wasn't interested in representing stories. Nobody is if you don't have a novel. But she really liked my writing and said, "Come back to me when you have a novel," which I did like 3-4 years later. And she's been representing me ever since. But I'm really interested to know why you changed agents.
So I had the same agent for 25 years. Oh. She actually found me when I was in college. It was at a time when young people were publishing in their early 20s, like Donna Tartt and Bret Easton Ellis and Jay McInerney. And so there was a trend toward young writers. So I had an agent I took a class with a professor who had just won the National Book Award for a novel. And she was actually a terrible teacher and not very nice.
I won't ask you who, but yeah, okay.
I'll tell you later. Yeah. And she, but weirdly, she gave my short stories to her agency without even asking or telling me.
Oh my God.
And then I got a call out of the blue from this young agent saying that she wanted to represent me. So it was such a strange thing. I didn't have a book. I didn't have anything. I had only finished a couple of stories in my lifetime. But it was kind of like in The Wizard of Oz, for me, I tell my students, there is a takeaway, even though this isn't a very common occurrence. There is a takeaway for other people. For me, it was sort of like in The Wizard of Oz when, they realized that if you put a medal of courage on the lion, the cowardly lion, so it was sort of like I had been given affirmation that I could possibly be a writer, and it gave me a lot of confidence that I didn't already have. But I was part of that lesson for me is that one of the reasons I think that I've survived this very up and down tumultuous life of being a writer, which I think you might agree, I see it in you too, is that I tend to follow the yes when I have plenty of people saying no over here, rejection and discouragement in whatever form their voices. I cling to that thin thread of the little glimmer of the person who's sort of like telling me I can do it, and I hold on to that, and it gets me to the next one. So I had this agent for years, and I felt like I should be writing. I went off to grad school. I wasn't writing fiction yet. And she kept calling every 4 months and just saying, "What are you thinking? Are you thinking about your novel?" I mean, she just sort of had, it was that encouragement. And eventually I said, "Look, I have student debt. I worked my way through college, 40 hours a week. I worked my way through grad school. I still had student debt that I have to repay because I've been postponing it with school." And I don't know how I can do this. And she said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to apply to a bunch of MFA programs. You're going to try to get a fellowship, and you're going to go to that place and write your novel. And don't tell them you're writing a novel, because they don't like that. They only like stories. And that's exactly what I did. I ended up doing exactly that. And I was with her for 25 years.
Wow.
And eventually it fell apart. I mean, she actually had personal stuff going on and sort of went AWOL right before my novel Orphan Train came out. So I had to
Oh
hop
my
to someone
gosh,
else.
how unfortunate.
Yeah. And so it was, I always say I'm now a multiple divorcee. Somehow once you get divorced, the concept of getting divorced gets a little easier to imagine. So I was with her and super loyal. And then I'm now on my fourth agent altogether.
Wow.
But it was just trying to find the right fit.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine switching once rather,
I know.
that's,
I know.
wow.
But there are a lot of agents out there. It's sort of
Mhm.
like there are a lot of therapists out there, and not all
Yeah, you have
are
to
right
find
for
the
you.
one who gets you.
And also sometimes different people bring out different aspects of who you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just felt like, okay, if I'm going to have moved on after 25 years, I want the relationship to feel really right.
Right.
And
Were the breakups difficult with the
yeah.
new people?
They
Oh,
were.
Oh.
The first one was hard because there was a lot on the line in terms of money and everything else. The second one, she's super, super powerful also, like my new agent. And it was fine, and she was really lovely about it, but it was still weird. And, it's never easy to sort of move on.
Yeah. Wow.
And
So who's
so
your agent now?
my agent is Eric Simonoff, who's the head of WME, which is William Morris.
Yeah.
And my film agent is also at WME. She's the head of literary to film. He's the head of books. And so they have a lot of, they work together a lot. So
that's really good to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but, and I don't have the relationship with him that you have with Gail, which is so lovely. I know we're kind of getting in the weeds here and probably way too technical for some people. But someone asks, what does an agent do versus what an editor does? You've addressed that a little bit, but in your case, it sounds like the editor you had, at least most recently, wasn't hands-on in the way that Gail was, or maybe that she didn't need to be because Gail had done it.
Yeah, it was more that she didn't need to be. Yeah. I mean, she was great. I mean, I love her. I hope I get her again. We've done 2 books together. But her edits are very light, which is great. I mean, at that point, I'm like, yeah, this book is done.
Yeah, that is really great.
I've done the hard stuff.
Right. Yeah. So Monica, I feel like we should pull back a little bit and talk about writerly friendships and the importance or the value of them. For you, I get a lot of questions from people about competition and jealousy, and whether it's possible for writers to be friends. In fact, I've had people tell me it's not possible for writers to be friends with each other because of, the fact that everyone's sort of competing.
Yeah.
But I wonder what your take would be on that.
Oh gosh, I think, envy is certainly part of any competitive field. It has to be. I mean, it's one of the 7 deadlies for a reason. But I have honestly, I can honestly say I have never suffered terribly from professional envy, because really a long time ago, I just decided, you run your own race, and someone else's success has nothing to do with whatever my success might be. Or, I mean, I have this right here. Look at this. This is sitting on my Post-it note. And it's just, I think it's really important because envy, it eats you alive. And I've seen it ruin people. I've seen it ruin people's writing.
Yeah. I think it absolutely can. And if you lose your own inner kind of compass and you start comparing yourself to other people, a lot of times you'll write cheap knockoffs of popular books. I mean, or I shouldn't say cheap knockoffs, but books that feel derivative in some way instead of trying to do something creative and new. And I think that's one of the dangers.
I think the worst danger is just sort of not doing your own work because you're so worried about what somebody else is doing or what you didn't get or what you know, it's just, it can, and it can be, I mean, it's a dog eat dog world out there, but I feel like, especially in the main writing community, I do not feel that. I don't feel that it's at all competitive or hierarchical or, um, you know, I feel like it's very supportive, and I hear it a lot from people who come here from somewhere else, and they
Yeah.
say, God, we can't believe how just how nice everyone is. You know, that everyone's nice, you know, supportive and welcoming, and um,
Well, I truly believe that the MWPA is a big part of that, the Maine
mhm,
Writers and Publishers Alliance, is that right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
because there's this, they foster this sense of community, and you're always
so,
looking at classes that are taught by one or two people together, or you're looking at
yeah,
the ways people do events together and sort of feed
mhm,
each other's work. And I would actually go even a step further, which is not only that we're each running our own race, but actually, to invoke another cliche, a rising tide lifts all boats.
yes,
I feel
right,
like when my friends are successful, it's only better for me.
yeah,
You know, you learn more about how the business works, and
yeah.
you get to celebrate each other's successes, and that there's a sort of way that we can feed each other's creativity as well,
Mhm.
feeding
Well, I
each other's
always feel
creativity.
like, you know, we're all on the same team, especially as Maine writers. And I just call it Team Maine. Like when something happens to somebody, I think, well, yay, Team Maine. That's how I look at it. And I think it's a healthy way to look at it. And I, I can't, I mean, I have seen it. I've seen envy really affect people's output, you know, because they kind of shut down because they feel like, well, I didn't get, you know, the big advance, or I didn't get the prize, or I didn't get, you know, whatever. And it, instead of making them do better or inspiring them to do better, it shuts them down. And which is such a shame.
I think there are so many ways that writers can shut down or get
Mhm.
themselves shut down. And as
Yeah.
you said, it's a bruising industry, partly because even if you do your very best and you turn in something that feels like the best you're capable of,
Mhm.
it can be a disappointment, or it
Yes.
can not perform the way you or your publisher
Well, most
want it to.
novels don't. Most
That's right.
novels don't perform the way you hope they will. Most writers don't make much money. Most of
Yeah.
them, the vast majority of writers don't make much money. So it's a, you know, it's a vocation. It's something that you really have to love and want to do because it's so full of disappointment.
Well, my three kids are all kind of in the music world. One's
Yeah,
still in college,
no,
and
they're
the other
so
two
good
are.
though, Christina.
They're sweet to say that, and I love them, of course, and I support them mentally, if not actually, in actuality, with the adult ones. But I've said to them, look, I think our philosophy is follow your bliss, do what you care about and love, but please know that your avocation may not
Right,
always be your vocation.
right.
And that's definitely something that stood me in good stead. I got qualified to teach at the college level, and I've always worked as an editor and a teacher until 5 or 6 years ago. I taught full time, I edited manuscripts,
Mhm.
and I think I never expected that I would make a living as a writer.
Right.
And I do think that's a different shift.
Yes.
And if you get really early success, I can think of half a dozen friends or more who've gotten 7-figure advances early,
Yeah.
really early, like first novels. And I think it warps your entire.
Completely. I feel really when I see some youngster getting this huge, you know, I'm thinking, oh God, I feel so bad because your next book is going to be the biggest disappointment. It usually is.
Yes, it almost always
And
is.
they think this is what it is. This is what writing, this is what the writing life is. This is what the writing business is. And they don't understand that they are just the exception that
Right.
proves the rule, you know. I mean, even people like some people you mentioned early on that were being published, like Donna Tartt. You know, she had
Yes,
this first book, The Secret History, which was so good.
brilliant.
She did not publish another novel for 20 years.
That's right.
Oh my
And
goodness.
Bret Easton Ellis has really struggled after writing
Yes,
Zero, and Jay McInerney too.
totally.
I was
He
actually
became
with
a
them.
wine writer or something for the New York Times, and you know that early, but it was sort of like, it reminds me a little bit of those actors in the Brat Pack
Yes,
around the same time, the ones who were in the Breakfast Club. You know, most of them didn't really go on to big movie careers. It was that one thing, and I don't know if it's because people just expected them to write the same book again with, you know, just keep doing
yeah.
the same thing, which I'm sure they didn't want to do. Who would? But I don't know. I just I think early success in the arts can be death.
I have a friend who had a big kind of blockbuster success, like in a literary way, won prizes, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And she said it took her more than 20 years. It's going to be like 22 years to publish her next big book after she had a disappointment.
Yeah.
And she said for years, it made her so on edge or angry when people would only talk about that book because she had
Yeah.
published a couple others. And she says, I've come around to a whole different way of thinking about it, which is if that's sort of the thing I'm remembered for, that's good enough. And
Yeah.
that's wonderful. I mean, I love that idea that you celebrate whatever it is, the one thing, if you've had something, and you hope lightning will strike again, but you know that it may very well not.
And
Love
you're in the weird position of competing with yourself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, like
Which is a very, once you keep writing, you've got that. Okay, we have a ton of questions. So let me just ask you a few here. What is it that you look for in an agent now is the question. And I guess that's for me because you haven't switched. So I'll just quickly say what I need right now is someone who can really manage my career, meaning I just want them to, how can I say this without sounding like a hard ass? I want my contracts to be really strong. I want to be protected. I know the pitfalls. I want, like, for example, he negotiated, my publisher never wants to give up world rights. Like
oh,
HarperCollins actually has a policy of not giving up world rights. And he was like, I'm not doing that.
Hmm.
So it was something that my earlier agents had tried and failed. And he's just
wow.
was adamant about it.
Hmm.
The things that agents can do for you are to protect you from, as he said, it's the protecting you from the 5% of things that can go wrong. Most of the time it's okay and a standard contract is fine, but it's really useful.
Right.
So I want an agent now who's really savvy about that stuff. And
Yeah.
because I have an editor I really trust.
Yes, that's really good.
So, and I think everybody plays different roles in that, but for me, that's important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. So speaking of film, what do you look forward to as an executive producer of The Exiles? I look
You're an
forward to,
executive producer?
I'm an executive producer. There are
Oh
like
my
four.
God, that's great.
Yeah, it's great. So I just want to have input and be involved. I'm not writing the script, but I mean, with I have the last 3 books there are lots of scripts running all over the place and everything's fallen through and come back up. And there's all this back and forth and none of them have been produced yet, if ever. Although The Exiles, I think is furthest along on that.
And is the idea of like a series or a movie or what?
Series. It would be a
Okay.
series, yeah. And so the head writer is working on what they call the Bible, which is the whole season, and as well as the.
But are you doing
pilot.
any of the writing, Christina?
I'm not doing any of the writing of the first draft, but I will be working. We've been sharing all this research. I've gave her all my notes and research and all these sort of storylines for the characters that weren't even in the book, that were just further things.
Yeah.
And then I'll be just editing and working with her, and they have to consult me about everything, which is a lovely thing about being
wow, because writers never get consulted. Once it's out there, they never get consulted. So good for you for getting that.
Well, it doesn't mean that it will be great, but it does mean that at least I'll
But at
have
least we'll have a
some,
little bit of control, you
yeah,
know.
that's super good.
Are they
Uh,
going to do, I'm gonna try if see people have not read The Exiles, which is wonderful. Are they going to do with one of the characters what you did with the character?
I think they're planning to
Okay.
do, yes, I
Okay, you
think,
know what I'm saying, right?
yeah, I do.
Okay, all right.
I think they are planning
Yep.
to, but we'll see because you never know how these
Yeah,
things
you never know.
unfold. Okay, so what led each of you to work with the incarcerated population?
Oh, well, for me, it was, I was invited in, this was for the original Ernie's Arc. And the Maine Community Foundation was doing a reading group in the prison. And she called me and asked me if I would be willing to come in and visit the women who were reading my book. And
Wow.
I said, yeah, I would love to. So I went over and it was, I was so, I don't know how to even describe it, but I was so happy the whole time I was there. And you know what it's like walking, it's all the clanking and the scraping metal and the guns and it's just not a
Right,
pleasant place to walk into.
not pretty.
But it was just, I don't know, I walk into this room, well, we were in the chow hall actually, so it was not even a great place to be. You know, you can hear a lot of clatter and stuff. But there they were, and there were, I think there were 10 of them. And they were the most wonderful readers, for one thing. They asked really interesting questions. They related to characters in the book that, in surprising ways, that once I thought about it, it wasn't as surprising. But I just had, we had the most wonderful, wonderful discussion. We laughed a lot. There was a little tearfulness, which turned out to be every single session I ever had with them. We would either both laugh and cry at least once, you know, during the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, I left and it was a one-time thing. It wasn't my group or program. I could not stop thinking about them. I could not. And so I wrote up this thing called Meet the Authors. It was a syllabus and I'm super organized. So it had like every single session, what we would do and da 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 da.
You did. I remember you shared some of it with me and it was
Yeah.
amazing to see.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I did that. It was it was 10-week programs, but and I did 3 or 4 of them. And the 10 weeks would then be, I think 16 was our longest, but we would always go later because then they would be writing at the end. So we'd become like a little writing group for the ones who wanted to stay and do some writing. But I haven't been back in like 4 years, and I've been really thinking about it again. You know, as soon as they're allowing stuff to happen, I would really like to go.
Go back in. I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I think I had such a different experience than you did, being in New Jersey instead of
Yes.
Maine, an incredibly different population.
Yes.
And I was
Very.
teaching in maximum security. So it wasn't, these women I was teaching had been had not shared much about themselves because they were afraid of being killed by other inmates. I mean, it was actually this building their trust was so hard. And
Hard.
it's actually the reason Monica and I met, because I can't remember, Monica, who passed,
I
was it
think it was
Lily?
Deborah Spark.
Oh, it was Deborah Spark who
Yeah.
said, right, who said, Monica Wood teaches at a women's prison. I'm like, first of all, I use her books in my classes all the time, your books about your inspiration and ideas for writing. I love those little books. I used to collect them. I have a collection. And I think they should bring them out again.
They're still, I think you could still
Are
get.
they still floating around? That is amazing. Yeah. I love them. If you guys have not seen them, Monica has done these books of ideas and inspiration about writing that are just so great.
They're called the Pocket Muse, and there's 2 volumes. One is blue and one is green.
And they're fantastic.
Yeah.
So I was thrilled to talk to you. I remember looking at your photo before I even knew that. So then to actually meet you in person was really fun at some point. But you were really helpful about the emotional ups and downs that the women would have, and about their own vulnerability and sharing, and how sometimes that would come out sideways. And so I had come from teaching very privileged kids at a fancy university, and I just felt like I wanted to see if I could help a population who had never really had that opportunity.
Mhm.
And I think it was life-changing. And I honestly think it led to The Exiles, which is about incarcerated
Yes,
women.
I was thinking that when I was reading it, I thought, wow, I bet I know where some of this interest comes from and the way you humanize the women who are in there. And it was clear that some of your life experience was poured into that part
Well,
of
it
the
makes
book.
sense for both of us,
Yeah,
for me with The Exiles and for you with this one,
yeah.
that experience you had, now you're able to synthesize,
Mhm.
make sense of, think about, and pass on to your readers. It's just wonderful.
I had so much fun writing the prison scenes
Oh
because
my
it just
gosh.
brought me back and it made me miss them a lot too.
Yeah,
Really
I
did.
can definitely see you going back and
Yeah,
doing
I'm definitely
that.
going back.
Okay, so someone says each of you has been great in highlighting other authors, which I really love doing. And who are you reading now?
I just finished a book by Ellie Williams. She's a young, I think, British writer called The Liar's Dictionary.
Yeah,
You read that?
no, but I've heard of it.
Well, I have mixed feelings about it. I loved reading it. I mean, her writing is just so effusively. She loves words, and it's about two lexicographers working on the same dictionary 100 years apart. And that's a long story why it's the same dictionary and never got finished. And so their stories kind of, but not a whole lot really happens until maybe the last couple of chapters. So plot wise, there's not much plot, but the writing is so delightful, and I learned so many new words. Um, I you just I don't even know how to. Her writing is so busy and just like you shake up a seltzer bottle and that's what comes out. I mean, I really, really liked that. I also just read another one that I had mixed feelings about the plot, which
Yes,
I know is a friend of yours who wrote it.
Jean. Yeah, I read it the day she finished it. I read it
Yes,
in manuscript.
it's
Crazy.
really unputdownable. I read it like in one swoop, like half the night, one of those. Her writing is wonderful. And, but I didn't realize that it was in the genre that it was in because her writing is so good.
Yes,
And so the book has to ultimately bow to the conventions of the genre.
that's
So
right.
I'll just say that. But there were so many hilarious inside jokes and things about the writing biz.
So I loved all of that
I
stuff.
think every writer should read. It was so funny.
Well,
And
I will say that I don't feel this way very often, but I read this book, as I told you, I never read in manuscript, first of all, but she's a really close friend and she's like,
yeah,
will you please
yeah.
I just spent she read it in like 3 months. It was crazy.
What?
Yeah,
Wow.
the first draft. But I read that book and I knew as I was reading it that it was going to be a bestseller and
Yeah,
that it was going to be her huge breakout book. And
yeah,
it has become
yeah.
that
It
just
has.
because it's got such a strong hook.
It's got a great hook.
You
Yes.
want to know, and the story within a story is
Yeah, yeah,
strong as
yeah.
well. It's just very smart.
Really, really, really well done.
It's a good book club book too, I would say.
It would be a fun book club book, wouldn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
And Jean Corliss, by the way, the author, is one of those writers who's just incredibly generous and
Oh,
very much a writer's writer. Like she hosts a group that, Monica, when your new book comes out, you should definitely do, called Book the Writer.
all right.
She's just very her outreach to other writers is really
Oh, that's
wonderful.
really nice. Well, she's an amazing writer. I mean, I just loved the prose to death.
That's so
Loved it.
great.
I have also completely fallen in love with Kevin Wilson.
Yes, I love.
I've read everything now, everything. His newest one is called Nothing to See Here.
I have it right here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And he has two short story collections. And then The Family Fang is like one of my favorite books of all time. He's just such a wonderful writer.
He's funny and clever and entertaining. But it doesn't feel like a guilty pleasure because his writing is so strong.
Oh, so
Yeah,
good.
I
Yeah.
really love that. Okay. boy, we are already at 4:50. It's
Oh my gosh, wow, okay,
we'll wrap up soon, but
yes.
someone asked, when writing historical fiction, how much time does research take and how long does it take to write one of your books? I assume this is to me, but you have books sort of set in the past as well, not in the far.
Not like that though, no.
So research takes a long time. I would say a full year of really delving in, and then all together, but you're already writing some of it. So I would say my books are probably 3 to 4 years apart usually. And so that's how much it takes. There's a year at Monica, as you well know, that of when you turn it in, then until it's published, at least a year.
Mhm.
So it's sort of a long process, but that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So someone says, can you speak about where the ideas come from for 1 in a Million Boy?
Oh gosh, 1 in a Million Boy. Can I just say, talking about this crazy business, the one, Christina knows this story, but I turned that manuscript in 2009, which is when the economy went south.
Right.
And my publisher, who had done 4 books with me, supposedly loved me to pieces, redacted the book, and it took them 12 weeks to do it too. And
Which was devastating. I mean,
I
this is
put that book away. I put that book away for 5 years. And then I took it out again and I worked on it for another maybe 6 months. And Gail sold it in like 3 days.
what did you do differently?
Not a whole lot, honestly. I worked on the character of Quinn. He was a little too sad sack in the first iteration, but honestly, it was basically the same book.
It was timing.
It was timing. It was timing.
That's pretty
So,
interesting.
yeah. So anyway, that's just an aside about the nutty business that we're in. Well, I can't remember what the question
Where
was.
the idea for it came from.
Oh, the idea. I don't know. I don't know how you are, Christina, but I mean, you're doing a lot of historical stuff, so it comes from that. But for contemporary books, I just start with something just pops into my head. And what popped in my head was a house at the end of, I know exactly where it is. It's like a few blocks from where I live. And a very old person living in the house and a bereaved person coming up the stairs and knocking on the door. That's all I had. That was it. And that's how and I just started writing that scene. And immediately the old person became a woman and she became very old, 104. And the bereaved person wasn't the mother, it was the father.
Right.
That's how it happens. It just kind of changes. But
yeah, that's wonderful. I want to add a couple of books that I've read recently. Actually two that were sent to me by Josh Bodwell, who he was the head of Main Writers and Publishers, and now he's the editorial director at Godine Press.
Right.
So I read Meredith Hall's book.
Oh my God.
I have a newsletter that I just started that's going out, I think, tomorrow. Crazy. I've never done it. Ugh, it's such a pain in the neck to do a newsletter. I don't know why I'm doing this, but
I looked at that. I said, why is she doing this? But
it's
anyway,
ridiculous.
Godspeed.
But anyway, I am, and I recommend her book. And I said in my little write-up, this is the maybe only time I've ever blurbed a book by mistake, by accident. So
that you've ever what done by accident?
Blurbed a book, written a quote for a book. So, Josh sent me the book and just was like, hey, I thought you might like this. And I was like, I have 50 million books on my desk. I'm never going to get to this. I had the first, and then I read it quickly and I wrote him my feelings about it. And he wrote back and said, can we put that on the paperback? And so
nice.
That was a funny
It's so beautiful. Her writing is so tender and deep, and it's hypnotic. I found it's a slow book, it's a very slow unfolding book, but I just felt like I was living with this family.
Yeah, I just put the name in there. I totally agree. And then another book, this is the second one I wanted to mention. It's holding up my laptop right now, so I guess I can't get it. But it's Night Came with Many Stars by Simon Van Buy. And
I just heard about that. Doesn't he live in Maine?
He lives in Maine. No, he doesn't really. I think he lived
in Maine at least sometime.
maybe sometimes, and lives in England.
And what is it called, Christina?
It's called, you have to get it from Josh. It's called Night Came with Many Stars. And I'm gonna actually lift it up and show you guys because it is so gorgeous as a book right here. Night Came.
Oh,
with
that is beautiful.
Stars. And
is it historical, a historical fiction?
It is, so no, well, I mean, I guess if history is midnight to 20th century.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll read you the premise because it's cool. In rural Kentucky in 1933, Carol's daddy lost his 13-year-old daughter in a game of cards. So the novel spans decades of the story of Carol and the people in her life. And it's just so wonderful. So,
wow, all right.
Yeah. And his writing is just incredibly literary, but very accessible as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, Susan in the comments just wrote, oh no, that's, let's see here. I think Susan wrote me directly, but I am going to add it to everyone, which is if you want to sign up for my newsletter.
Oh yeah.
That's the info. If I'm going to write a stupid newsletter, I might as well. And get some people to read it. This newsletter is filled with my six things about Maine that have sustained me over the past year.
Oh, that's nice. Aww.
So that's kind of fun.
I know you've been pretty much stranded here for the whole time, right?
It will be 18 months. You
haven't been back to New York at all?
We went to get vaccinated. I was there for exactly 12 hours each time and hopped back in the car and drove back to Maine. So no, it's crazy.
So nervous about my apartment being empty all that time.
Well, I have a child living there. And
oh, you do? Oh, perfect. Okay.
Who we're having vacate before we leave there. So he's had a pretty nice year.
Yeah. No kidding, right?
In our apartment, yeah. But we've loved being here. And, you know, I grew up in Maine, but I haven't spent winters here in a long time. So that was, I actually loved hunkering down.
It wasn't too bad a winter either, really. If you had to spend this was a pretty good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, good. Well, now you can enjoy the summer, which is great. You're in the perfect place.
So great. You got to come up and visit.
I know, I will. I promise.
And I guess we should kind of wrap things up.
I know, it's almost 4. I mean, almost 5.
Susan, do you want to come back in?
Here she comes.
Love to.
Hi.
Hi. So that was lovely. And I think before we started, I was mentioning how it feels voyeuristic to listen to you both go back and forth to talk and catch up with each other. And with that voyeuristic, it's a very good thing. It's the lovely things like sitting with you in the same room, catching up with things we didn't know about. So this whole afternoon has been delightful. And thank you so much for joining our author series collaborative, both you and Monica, for spending time with us today. It's been great.
It's been great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to
everybody.
Monica, and thank
wait a minute. I just thought, are you going to be on Maine Public Radio?
I am going to be their summer read or whatever.
Oh, how great.
Yeah.
She's great. She'll be really prepared. She's the
Exiles. I'm excited. Yeah, I think that'll be really fun. Yay.
Oh, excellent. Wonderful.
Great.
All right.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.